As the conflict between Ukraine and Russia began to escalate in the past few weeks, many were skeptical that Vladimir Putin would actually invade the country. I was one of those skeptical individuals. Even though we had U.S. intelligence reports suggesting that Russia would go into Kiev, the capital, I still said that's absurd. Even only a few days ago, we said Russia going even as far west as Kharkiv, which is still rather eastern, was not going to happen. And now we know we were wrong. Russia has staged a full-scale invasion of the country. And the latest update is that Russian forces have taken the Chernobyl nuclear disaster site. In response to the invasion, we are seeing severe sanctions on Russia from the West, from the US and the UK. And I feel I must say we are now facing a very real prospect for World War III. I hate to say it, that phrase is so cliche and tired because throughout my career in journalism and politics, I should say, in political commentary and culture, we have heard of many circumstances in which we thought maybe Israel and Palestine could trigger a third world war. Or maybe the Middle East, maybe Iran outside of Israel, areas of the Middle East could trigger this. Now, perhaps it is still a bit too bold, but we have not been as close as we are to a full-scale international conflict as we are now. And you need to understand the reason this may not be hyperbole is that there are actual discussions of booting Russia off what's called the SWIFT payment system. This is the international monetary system for handling ACH transactions. This would cut off Russia from global finance. The result would be Russia working with China, perhaps Iran, North Korea, or other countries to develop alternate means of economic trade or financial systems, which would completely undermine the petrodollar and create global instability. Russia will not cease to exist simply because we cut off the entire nation from SWIFT. But if we do, many are warning the end of the petrodollar brings about global energy instability at a time when these sanctions on Russia already mean gas prices and energy prices for Europe and the US are set to skyrocket. The dominoes are being knocked over. I'd like to believe that retaliation will not occur. But now it's being reported by NBC News that Joe Biden has been presented with options for the U.S. to engage in direct attacks on Russian infrastructure. I don't want to believe it. I think the U.S. would be insane. Now they're talking about cyber infrastructure attacks, which may already be occurring. And I can show you some stories to suggest that may be the case. We don't know for sure because it's hard. You can't see cyber attacks. We can see the physical hot warfare in Ukraine. We can see the videos. It's hard to know what's propaganda, what's fake video, and what's real. But some of it, you can still see very real conflict occurring. But if the U.S. does choose to engage in direct assaults on Russian infrastructure, we are talking about the U.S. engaging in direct war with Russia. If European nations and the U.S. do cut off Russia from SWIFT, they go to China. China gets their back. China is already pressing on Taiwan right now. As we speak, news articles are emerging that Chinese Air Force is already pressing into the Taiwanese air defense zone. Now, this has happened before. It happens often. It's not necessarily new, but China is ready, willing, and able to go and take Taiwan. And that means the U.S. gets cut off from silicon chips, computer technology. We will be seriously harmed by this. All of these are painting a very bleak picture. Hopefully it doesn't happen. It's hard to be right. I can't make accurate predictions on this stuff. I can only tell you what we're seeing now and what may occur. And often what I think may occur isn't correct. I did not believe that Russia would actually try to take Kiev. I did not believe U.S. officials when they said they would. My friend from Kiev is telling me fighting is happening there now. And if you don't trust the Biden administration, I don't blame you, because I don't necessarily trust them either. This could all be propaganda to drum up support for war with Russia. It could be something the West wants. But I trust my friend. I trust my friend and their family members. I trust them showing me videos. So I don't know what to say other than I pray that it does not escalate beyond as bad as it's getting right now. But you need to understand Russia moving into Ukraine. This is not like Middle Eastern conflict. This is not like Israel and Palestine. This is Russia, a nuclear power, not the most powerful in the world. Perhaps with nuclear power, they may be, but not the most powerful militaristically. But they are large. They do have allies, and the U.S. has a lot of enemies. Cutting off Russia means Russia now goes to work with the adversaries of the U.S. And then something cold and dark may be coming this way. I want to start by showing you just the latest update. Russian forces taking Chernobyl. Before we get started, please head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support our work. If you like the articles we write, if you think our journalists do a good job, being a member makes sure we continue to operate. Our news articles are free. We could put up a paywall. We don't want to do that. We do have a paywall up for our exclusive members only segments, but this is commentary. We want to make sure that the news is readily and available, and we're helping cut through the noise because boy, is there a lot. With your support, we can continue to do that. And don't forget to smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel. Share the show with your friends. And boy, do I just want to point out the strange evolution of our generation. That I'm talking about the prospects of global war and saying, smash that like button. Who would have thought? These statements, these tropes, these behaviors that developed from young people watching silly internet videos could become so serious. I pray the like button and algorithm isn't disruptive to you getting the important news, but seriously, please consider sharing this. One of the latest updates on the conflict from timcast.com, Russian forces entering Ukraine from Belarus have seized control of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster site. The decommissioned power plant exploded in 1986, spraying radioactive waste across Europe. On day one of the first major land war in Europe in decades, the Russian military plunged into Ukraine by land, sea, and air, killing dozens of Ukrainian soldiers and ominously touching off a pitched battle at the highly radioactive Chernobyl exclusion zone that risked damaging the cement-encased nuclear reactor that melted down in 1986. National Guard troops responsible for protecting the storage unit for dangerous radioactive waste are putting up fierce resistance. It's reported far and wide. This is very, very close to Kiev. You need to understand it's very close to Kiev, the capital. U.S. officials have told Newsweek they believe the country will fall. I'm worried about what happens with U.S. allies, NATO allies, with Baltic states when Russia has conquered Ukraine, if they do, and then is pressing on the borders of these countries. Mind you, they already are in Kaliningrad. They already are. So I don't want to suggest that could be the catalyst. This could be. In the latest news, NBC is reporting that Joe Biden has been presented with options for massive cyber attacks against Russia. The options presented included disrupting the internet across Russia, shutting off power, and stopping trains in their tracks. The idea that the U.S. would engage in direct attacks on Russian infrastructure, to me, is psychotic. It is a death wish. It's bad enough Russia is doing what they're doing. If the U.S. were to retaliate directly in any way, it would be an act of war against Russia. Vladimir Putin has already warned. Anyone who interferes will face repercussions never before seen in history, with many believing that was a nuclear threat. Could be anything. It could be biological. It could be rods from God. Do you know what that is? The idea that they would put a satellite in space that could just drop a tungsten rod that would slam down and just destroy them. It's powerful, to say the least. Now, that may be urban legend. We don't know what kind of weapons exist today. But if you think that we are still operating off of 100-year-old technology, okay, 80-year-old technology, these nuclear gravity bombs, you would be mistaken. Vladimir Putin may have capabilities well beyond what we would expect. NBC News says 2 U.S. intelligence officials, one Western intelligence official, and another person briefed in the matter say no final decisions have been made, but they say the U.S. and military cyber warriors are proposing the use of American cyber weapons on a scale never before been contemplated. Among the options, disrupting the internet across Russia, shutting off electric power, and tampering with railroad switches to hamper Russia's ability to resupply its forces, 3 of the sources said. You could do everything from slow the trains down to have them fall off the tracks. This is wildly wildly inappropriate. The fact that this story is even being reported is a signal to Russia. Maybe that's the point. The U.S. wants Russia to fear they will retaliate with cyber weapons. But as much as Vladimir Putin may disagree, mutually assured destruction is a real possibility. If the U.S. engages in hostilities against Russia, you think Russia's going to be like, we're fine with it? Keep screwing with our infrastructure? I really doubt it. The sources said the options presented included preemptive responses to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, irrespective of whether Russia launches its own cyber attacks on the U.S. in retaliation for sanctions. Now, this, my friends, is the most direct potentiality, but I don't think it's the worst. Fighting with Russia could end. You could start a fight. Both sides could be like, okay, let's slow down there a minute. What comes next is actually a whole lot scarier. Take a look at this story from Financial Times. World leaders divided on whether to eject Russia from the SWIFT payment system. The SWIFT payment system, international financial exchange, cutting them off basically means that the petrodollar is done. Russia will need other means of securing and trading energy and resources, and they will, of course, have it, and China already has their back. We would fracture the world between two parallel economies, and then Russia will need not the SWIFT payment system. They'll have nothing stopping them from engaging in full-scale war against the U.S., nor will any of Russia's allies. Before I talk about this and break down what SWIFT is, I want to make sure that I give you a general understanding of what cyber war could mean. If Joe Biden, as I stated, engages in cyber attacks against Russia, what could we see? I want to show you this video from February 23rd at 8 a.m. Sky News reports, a boiler explosion has reduced a food plant to ashes in Oregon. One worker described the explosion as being like a tornado ripping through the building before the roof was blown off. One response was, no safety valves? We don't know what caused this. It could just be, I believe they're saying, a faulty pipe. Perhaps. I have no reason to suggest otherwise. But I want you to know, if there were to be cyber war, it would look just like this, and you would not know. They're not going to publicly release that our infrastructure is vulnerable. They don't want to panic. But it's very easy to disrupt industrial control systems through cyber warfare. One person responded, all those executive orders Biden signed in 2021 sure made a lot of explosions randomly happen in the same industries his executive orders are attacking. Fertilizer plants, pipelines, and now food plants. Maybe Build Back Better is about building it all. I don't think that as, look, my personal opinion, if you asked me to place a casino chip, $100 on cyber attack or no cyber attack, my bet, cyber attack. But I could be wrong. I have no evidence. I just think with the budding international conflict, it's possible. Let me show you something that I've often talked about, which may be indicative of cyber war. But again, I don't know for sure. From The Guardian, Trump says he stopped airstrike on Iran because 150 would have died. This story from Friday, June 21st, 2019. We have this story from CNBC, October 16th, 2019. The June 21st blaze at a Philadelphia refinery was likely caused by a faulty pipe, according to a preliminary report from the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. The explosion released more than 5,000 pounds of deadly hydrofluoric acid into the air. The refinery closed shortly after the fire, and Philadelphia Energy Solutions filed bankruptcy in July. It was a June 21st fire. I believe it was in the wee hours of the morning. I could be wrong. I believe it was the early morning hours of June 21st. Around 4:20, the fire raged at 4:15 a.m. At the same time this is going on, it was reported at 9 a.m. on June 21st. Donald Trump has said the U.S. Air Force was cocked and loaded to attack 3 Iranian targets on Friday morning, but he called off the strike with 10 minutes to spare after being told that the airstrike might kill as many as 150 people. Trump said in a series of morning tweets he decided on late Thursday that the death toll was not a proportionate response to the Iranian shooting down of a U.S. spy drone off the Iranian coast. Now, okay, it may be that Donald Trump called off the attack well before this refinery exploded. I asked some of my friends who work in cybersecurity, and specialize in cyber war. And they said, we don't see a relation. Perhaps. Now, we don't know exactly when this was called off, but we know that in the wee hours of the morning, around 4 o'clock, a refinery explodes. We know it's then reported around 9 a.m. Trump had called off an airstrike on Iran. Maybe my timeline's off. Maybe it's coincidental. It's entirely possible. But could it have been that we knew it was a cyber attack and Trump said the retaliation for this will be too severe, retreat? We are not secure. We are not prepared. I don't know. I really don't know. But I think it's important to consider. Now, of course, the official reporting is that it was a faulty pipe causing this fire to start. And maybe that's the case. I just want you to understand that, there's some speculation. And I think it's fair to say the official reporting says that's not the case. My sources say it's not the case. I'm just saying. That's it. It would look like this. Companies would shut down. The latest updates on the war. Let's get back to it. From Boston Globe, AP reporting, Biden announces new sanctions against Russia. They say the sanctions target banks, oligarchs, and high-tech sectors. The U.S. and its allies will block assets of 4 large Russian banks, impose export controls, and sanction oligarchs. They go on to say that Biden for now is holding off on imposing some of the most severe sanctions, including cutting Russia out of the SWIFT payment system, which allows for the transfer of money from bank to bank around the globe, or Russia's energy sector. But we're going there. Boris Johnson pushes very hard for the move, while Germany warns against ahead of emergency EU meeting. Financial Times reports Western leaders are split on whether Russia should be ejected from the SWIFT international payment system, a move that could deliver a heavy blow to the country's banks and its ability to trade beyond its borders. Do you not think that Russia is prepared for this? It is naive. The international trade ties prevent Russia from going too far. Russia is doing what it thinks it can get away with. At least Vladimir Putin does. He does not believe they will push him that hard. But you know what, man? If they cut off Russia from SWIFT, then Putin says, so be it, we're off the leash. And with reports that the U.S. has prepared retaliation against Russian infrastructure, we're playing with fire. For those that aren't familiar, I would like to point out first and foremost, if you watch Timcast IRL, you have long heard, probably for the past couple of years we've been doing the show, Ian talk about the SWIFT payment system and the global control that these despots and oligarchs have by controlling this payment system. Now we're seeing it come into play. The New York Post says, what is SWIFT? Russia could be ejected. They say the SWIFT system, or Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, facilitates financial transactions and money transfers for banks located around the world. The system is overseen by the National Bank of Belgium and enables transactions between more than 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries around the world. Without access to SWIFT, Russia and its financial institutions would be effectively cut off from most international business transactions. For example, Russia would be unable to secure profits from international sales of its oil and gas production, deals that comprise more than 40% of the country's revenue. I'm already seeing journalists demanding we make this move, particularly UK journalists. I hope they realize Russia will not just disappear. Many have said to me, because I believe there's some conservative personalities saying Russia does not have the GDP to engage in long-term warfare. They can only handle short excursions, perhaps. But China has their back. China needs Russia's help in claiming Taiwan. And plus, they want to expand in the South China Sea. They want to control the area. So perhaps. But also, if Russia takes Ukraine, Russia gains Ukrainian assets. Are they going to gain the entirety of the Ukrainian GDP? No, but Russia will gain those assets. They will need these assets to maintain control over Ukraine, but it gives them massive access to resources. Those that are familiar with the Cold War know what Russia can and has done to Ukraine once they gain access to their resources. Now, Boris Johnson wants swift actions. He wants Russia out of SWIFT. And while those discussions are happening, the Times of Israel reports UK to ban Russia's Aeroflot Sanction banks, businesses, and oligarchs. This may not be the apocalypse, but it is a domino not falling over, which I believe is driving us in that direction. We have reports from The Guardian. Kiev is furious as EU wavers on banning Russia from the SWIFT payment system. Ukraine foreign minister voices anger as EU leaders likely to decide against blocking Russia from international payment system. Now, I don't know what the right move is. Perhaps sanctions are the path forward. Perhaps not. I can say I don't want war. I don't want the U.S. involved in war. But I don't know if we have a choice. While many say we should never engage and we should prevent all war at all costs, that may be true. But what if our allies are attacked? Do we abandon them? Many say yes. Does NATO then break apart? Many say yes. Do we just let Russia keep going? We've seen these strategies before. It didn't work in World War II. I'm not saying Putin is Hitler. Not at all. And just because it happened then doesn't mean the same course of action will result in the same consequences. It's possible Russia really does just stay within Ukraine. But what happens in 10, 20 years? Russia wants the Soviet Union back. Vladimir Putin does. He's an old man, 69 years old. I don't know who steps up and takes his place. And if they do they have the same vision as him? I don't know. So perhaps the best thing we can do is prevent war at all costs and just wait until Russia has a change in leadership. We have the story from Reuters. Russian banks face exclusion from London. So we are seeing these sanctions across the board, but let's take a look at what's going to happen in Ukraine. Newsweek reports, U.S. expects Kiev to fall in days as Ukraine source warns of encirclement. 3 U.S. officials have told Newsweek they expect Ukraine's capital, Kiev, to fall to incoming Russian forces within days and the country's resistance to be effectively neutralized soon thereafter. The officials, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said that Moscow's focus, as revealed by Putin, his references to demilitarize the neighboring country, would be to encircle Ukrainian forces and force them to surrender or be destroyed. They expect Kiev to be taken within 96 hours, and then the leadership of Ukraine to follow in about a week's time. I don't know where we go from there. I can tell you this. While all of that is happening, China is gearing up for their own conflict. China refuses to call Russian attack on Ukraine an invasion and deflects blame to U.S. CNBC reports China's foreign ministry spokesman refused to categorize an attack as an invasion. Within hours, leaders from the U.S., Germany, and UK condemned Russia. Chinese Assistant Foreign Minister Hua Chunying was asked by reporters several times whether she would call Russia's attacks an invasion, but she repeatedly avoided giving a yes or no answer. In response to one reporter, Hua appeared to express frustration at the question and said the U.S. has been fueling the flame, fanning up the flame. How do they want to put out the fire? Hua said Russia was an independent major country that could take its own actions. She referred repeatedly to Russia's government statements on Ukraine. China is closely following the development of the situation. What you are seeing today is not what we have wished to see. We hope all parties can go back to dialogue and negotiation. Sure. But Beijing says, from the Hill, Taiwan is not Ukraine and has always been a part of China. And while this is happening, Reuters reports Taiwan warns Chinese aircraft in its air defense zone. We don't know what tactics China will take on Taiwan, but this is the exact scenario many had warned about. The several videos I've produced and the conversations we've had on Timcast IRL, that should Russia move into Ukraine and this conflict escalate, in the distraction, China will take its opportunity to move on Taiwan. And what does that mean for Iran and Israel, for Yemen and Saudi Arabia? I think something dark. Ben Shapiro, great tweet. He said that the U.S. is so materialistic, we think sanctions will work. Russia wants to rebuild its empire. Iran is driven by ideology. They despise Israel. China is not concerned about their material possessions. They're concerned about taking Taiwan. But all the U.S. can seem to do is say, well, then you can't buy stuff. But when you're dealing with ideologues, when you're dealing with these concepts of manifest destiny, that these countries have a right to these lands, they don't care about what you think they should be able to buy. Now, refueling their troops, feeding their soldiers, that I understand. Cutting them off can hinder this. And cutting off resources to their countries might piss off the local populations who then say, we don't want war. We want cheesecake. We want Dave and Buster's. But at the same time, it could drive up the national resolve. We're hearing reports of massive protests in many countries. In Russia, for instance, people are protesting against the war. It does not mean that everyone in Russia supports these protests. Western nations and our allies will obviously be showing you those videos and saying, look, the people of Russia support us. Why? So that if we attack Russia, we can say, we will be welcomed as liberators. Or at the very least, we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. But Russia has their perspective. Russia believes that Ukraine has been conquered by the West and that Zelensky and the Ukrainian administration are puppets of NATO. That's why they're doing this. They think they're liberating Ukraine. I would not say they're entirely wrong, but both sides feel morally justified. Reuters. Well, let me see if I can get this to come up. This story from Reuters about Taiwan. Taiwan's Air Force scrambled again on Thursday to warn away 9 Chinese aircraft that entered its air defense zone, Taiwan's defense ministry said, on the same day that Russia invaded Ukraine, a crisis being closely watched in Taipei. There's a lot of ramifications for what could happen if this conflict actually continues. Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory, has complained of regular such missions by the Chinese Air Force over the past 2 years, though the aircraft do not get close to Taiwan itself. I want to make sure I'm stressing that point specifically in this story, which is why I'm trying to get it to pull up. I don't want people to look at this and think it's new. A lot of people talking about this saying, here we go, World War III, need to understand the context that China has been engaging in this behavior for some time. So we don't know. We don't know if this means anything beyond just China is doing what China does with Ukraine. Seeing some of these videos and these photos, man, it's really shocking to say the least. It's really, really shocking. Many people are saying no intervention. I know I've made this point before, but it bears repeating. I agree. What do you do? Watching the people of Ukraine suffer, watching the children suffer. Viral videos and propaganda. I won't fall for it. I hope you don't either. There's a viral video showing a man with his daughter and his wife, and he's crying as he kisses his daughter goodbye because he has to stay in Ukraine and fight. And I have never felt such respect for another human being, and to see that man, I know other people, but to watch this video. And that being said, seeing this adult man hug his daughter for what may be the last time and cry, as much as I have respect for this man to say, I will not let Russia take my country. I will not fall victim to the emotional and propagandistic attacks that would get me to encourage U.S. attacks against Russia. I don't even know if the sanctions are the right move. I do not have all the answers. Mostly I'm anti-intervention. Ukraine is not on our border. We are not involved in this conflict. It's Ukraine and Russia. Do we sit back and let Russia engage in this aggression? Why should we intervene? Is the United States the world police? Are we really that empire that must intervene in every step of the way? I don't think so. I mean, I know we are. We shouldn't be. I think we should mind our own business, strengthen our borders. You ever play the game Civilization? Amazing game. The way I always play is strong, technologically advanced military, strong borders, and leave me the F alone. It's a video game where you build a civilization, and often war happens. I never, when I played this game, view invading. I know you can win the game by invading other countries and conquering the world. That's not how I play. I go for science and cultural victories. But when these people invade me in the game, I crush them. That's the way I see it. Ukraine is not us. Sure, we must be prepared to defend our allies in the Baltic states. That's where things get scarier. If Russia does make a move on any of these countries, I mean, they're already in Belarus. Belarus says that they have nothing to do with it. Is it possible that Russia moves into Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia? I hope not. And for now, we have no reason to believe that would be the case. But it's funny when they say, when Russia's like, we don't want NATO on our doorstep. What about the Baltic states? Yeah. Lies. They have Kaliningrad. Poland is right there. No, Russia wants Ukraine. Putin wants the Soviet Union back. I have no reason to believe he stops with Ukraine. And many people are pointing that out. Like Hitler with the Sudetenland. He's not going to just claim one region. He's going to go for everything. And then what? I don't know, man. I think my view of things is the U.S. will likely stay out of it for the most part. I don't believe they'll engage in cyber attacks against Russia. Or if they do, it'll be secret. It'll be privateer, mark, and reprisal or something like that. Letters of marque. Effectively, private organizations operating in the shadows will take credit for attacks against Russia, and the U.S. will disavow all knowledge to avoid direct declarations of war. But do you think Russia's stupid? It's the funniest thing. Do you think Russia is stupid? If they get hit by a cyber attack, are they just going to go, oh, it must be rogue third parties? The same is true with the letters of marque, with the corsairs and privateers back in the colonial era. When privateers would ransack, say, French supply lines, the British Crown would say, oh, we would never condone piracy. It's certainly not us. They weren't flying our flags. But do you think these other countries are stupid? And they're going to be like, must have been a random attack. Must be just pirates. Or do you think they know? You signed a letter of marque commissioning the attack against us. We can try and feign ignorance all we want. But the reality is when world war starts, all that matters is whoever has the ability to end it does. And that won't come until there's widespread death and destruction. I hope it is not the case. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. tonight over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.